Welcome to NREI's Common Area Podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the award-winning editorial staff at nreionline.com. Let's jump right into this week's podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Common Area with your host, David Bodamer. Good morning, David. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm excited. I hear we have a guest on the show. Can I introduce him real quick?
Yes, that would be great.
Fantastic. All right. So our guest today is, or I should say David's guest today is Kevin Weyer, and he is the president of JLL's public sector and higher education business. Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning, Eric and David.
I'm so glad that you're here. I'm just going to sit back and learn from you guys. David does a great job of bringing out the best in every guest, so get to it.
All right. Actually, I've worked with JLL and many people over the years, but I've never actually talked with this group. So I'm kind of curious. It's not really an area that we've written much about. So I was wondering if you could just start by giving some background on what your group does at JLL.
Sure, David. Thanks for having me on. We saw a unique opportunity to focus in on industries many years back. And one of those industry sectors was our government and higher education space. Fair amount of unique cultural aspects, business aspects to both the government and higher education, and really saw an opportunity to bring the wealth of services, whether they're transactional, facilities management, public-private partnerships, technology solutions to this specific sector. And we've had a great deal of success helping clients realize their goals and visions to define their space needs, campus needs, and overall objectives around managing real estate portfolios.
With universities in particular, what are some of the ways, as you've gone in and as you've worked with these, different groups across the country, what are some of the ways that you find they can find savings or efficiencies in how they're managing their properties and facilities?
Yeah, sure. Working with universities is always fun. It's enjoyable to get back to college campuses, but the real estate assets at those college campuses have just grown immensely, and those portfolio needs around those assets is something that universities, in particular in today's market, shines an even brighter light, but something they've been dealing with, whether it's unique ways to deliver development projects through P3 partnerships or creative design build contracting mechanisms, whether it's looking at their portfolios and determining what should be owned and what should be leased, and when to execute on each of those strategies in their markets or in their expansion plans. Additionally, their workplace management systems and overseeing their asset operations and expenses and driving efficiency in those expenses, whether it's looking at their capital programming and capital improvement plans, really managing those and the business cases around those through technology systems, as well as really solid financial planning and business case analysis. All of those are areas that we get called upon to support universities in their various initiatives. And really, it's something that from the East Coast to West Coast has been fairly prevalent. The other thing I'd add for you, David, is just product type wise, whether it's student housing, whether it's academic space, whether it's on-campus hotels, whether it's town gown mixed-use projects, that could invite or include residential, retail, office space, supporting lab space. Those are all areas that, from an investment market, is something that the universities, will definitely partner with the private sector to help deliver.
Are there particularities about working with universities that are different than working with other kinds of clients when managing their real estate?
What I would say about universities is the mission is key, right? And from the systems, if they're big public state university systems, down through the chancellors, and ultimately to the president and down to each of the deans, the mission of academics drives. And so the ability to attract top professor talent, top talent obviously in their students that they select to come to their campus, and the recruiting process around that. And then the third leg of that stool is really the alumni network, and ensuring that development outreach to the alumni, and that the campus itself is something that really suits the alumni to want to give and continue to promote that which they were part of. And so all of those items really drive what the universities want to do and how they view real estate as something that is a marketing tool, as well as the occupancy tool, right, for each of those stakeholder groups to really deliver their services to the university or college.
So can you talk a little bit too about like a university reaches out and brings your group in? What does that process look like? What are the steps then that you take as you go in and start to assess and then come up with recommendations?
To bring JLL into that process is often in the public setting, a public procurement. In a private setting, can be a bit more negotiated. But once we're in, these universities are really strong demand centers from a population, from an occupancy standpoint. And so to attract private sector capital, development expertise, or even operations implementation programs, there are a lot of folks who want to participate in the university market because of that strong demand component. And so that is something that our job is really to serve as the advisor to the university on those types of projects, and help be the Rosetta Stone between the university's mission and needs and what the private sector can bring to the table. The second area is that we will also help with the implementation services around large-scale enterprise management systems at universities to help manage data, help analyze that data, and help come up with implementation strategies around that data through their technology needs. And then lastly, for the outsourcing of facilities management, we have a division that provides facility management services into that university market. And it's a market that continues to grow, especially in a COVID situation like we're in now, where there's a desire to increase service delivery, but also reduce costs in that process. And so the conversations around how best to do that are definitely increasing in nature as we work through those discussions. But it's really in each of those areas that we serve, and really serve on behalf of those institutions to meet their mission needs.
I want to come back to some of the COVID questions in a second, but one other thing, just coming off of some of the things you're saying, is, are there situations where you come in and you look at the university's assets and something, look at the campus or some of the buildings they might have, and are there times, I think you did mention this though, about like, there might be situations where it makes more sense to lease, or for them to not necessarily own the assets? And are there particular building types or uses that generally make more sense to try to for the university just to sell and be a tenant of, rather than own and run top to bottom?
Yeah, it's a great question, David. I think it includes a number of different facets. It includes the capitalization situation of that university and the balance sheet situation of that university. It depends on the location, whether you're urban or rural. It certainly depends on the use and the ability to pay for that use. But in all of those cases, there is an underlying theme that the university's objective is to be around for, many of these universities have been around for hundreds of years, and so their desire is on a time frame that's much longer than your practical lease per se. And so that belies a lot of the discussion and analysis that goes into take, and that we will often take into account for each of those factors to come up with a solution that again meets the university's needs for whatever the product is or the locational need is. And it's a complex process, which makes it all the more interesting and all the more of an opportunity to participate in.
And on the other side, do you find that there are particular kinds of investor types that are looking to be in these, public-private partnerships that want? I don't know if there is an answer to that question, but I'm curious. It's like, like if it's high net worth or institutions, or if there is a specific kind of real estate investor that's like, yeah, like I want to be associated with the university. I want to invest in this kind of real estate or, whatnot.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in, as I mentioned earlier, these demand centers, whether they're transportation nodes or government enclaves, or in this case, university settings, because they just promote economic activity. And so when there's economic activity, as you know, there is always a ready and willing investor base to participate and provide capital into good opportunities. And so we have seen many, if not all, of the players in the market for deals that we've looked at. Obviously on the high net worth side, donors are always a significant component of the university space. And so, many buildings get built, solely on a single donor. But working away from there to more classic real estate investor players, that is a market that, again, capital is often not an issue in attracting to any of the deals that we've advised on. And it's really about structuring the deal to make the most sense for that university, while making sure that you optimize the financing costs in the private sector market as well.
I'm going to touch on this a little bit, but we are at this sort of, I think you've given this great backdrop for what your practice does and what some of these opportunities are. We are at this now, obviously, extraordinary moment of COVID-19. At this point, it seems like I think Cal State just announced in the past couple of days that they're not going to bring students back for the fall. And I guess this is undoubtedly a question that's happening across the country. So what does this kind of moment mean for facilities management and real estate operations on campus, for both, the short term of the upcoming semesters and then longer term when students do eventually, come back? Because I don't, it doesn't seem, at some point universities are going to have students there again.
Yeah, no, I think we've all used the phrase, well, that'll never happen. And here we are in the middle of something that is unparalleled in nature, and something that is obviously affecting the university market, not only from the standpoint of reduction in revenues, and those revenues are not only tuition, they're housing revenues and ancillary fee revenues at those institutions, but then also on the cost side and the ability to manage the costs that are inherently inside the university itself. And those could be in the form of debt, they can be in the form of operational costs. And so each of these universities, well, the one other thing I would add is just term, right? We don't know what the term on this situation is going to be. Is it just the spring semester? We know that it's affected the summer at most institutions, if not all, by the end of the summer, as far as summer programs. And that's another key revenue opportunities at these universities. And then obviously the fall. And there's a lot of time being spent on the reentry discussion for this fall. And how do universities plan agilely from a 100% remote working or learning environment to a 50-50 to perhaps it'll be all on campus. And in all of those cases, you work through social distancing discussions, wayfinding discussions. What's the HVAC systems situation in these campus buildings? What is the habitation environment within the student housing complex itself? And that can be a single building, or it can be the overall complex for that university. What is the situation on co-living versus, putting a single student in each room? To what is the space overflow should you need quarantine in the future, or perhaps want to continue to promote distancing within, again, that habitation environment. So you've got a lot of different factors, even beyond the academic component, which these universities are really grappling with first and foremost. The nice thing has been that really that perfection of the online learning platform has expedited over the last 2 or 3 months while folks have been in quarantine, which is terrific. It gives optionality to the discussion. But we are fielding a number of calls and have been engaged to help clients think through what are those asset components and campus components that can contribute to a safe and healthy environment for, again, the academic community, the student population, as well as the families and alumni that come through campus. And that is first and foremost, I think, in everyone's minds, and figuring out how to educate is a component of that. So, it's been quite remarkable to see the mobilization around that. In many ways, it was much easier to shut off the system than it is to restart it without a medical solution in place.
Oh, yeah. So, it just seems like for your group in particular, there's just a lot to. We didn't even touch on some of the other parts of your group. We're just talking about this higher education piece. What is kind of like your week to week, day-to-day workflow look like right now in terms of like having these conversations with your clients and managing your team and doing all this?
Yeah, let's put it this way. I think the work from home model for our team has been one of 24/7 of late.
Mm-hmm.
Our clients are in a place, dealing with temporary medical facilities. If you're in the state and local government community, to setting up testing sites, to navigating, their own in-house employee base. Obviously, we've touched on a fair amount of that education market as well, but it is something that I think everybody is working to really manage through. So we've been extremely busy helping clients with some very serious matters dealing with the health and well-being of their employee base or their market base in the case of higher ed. And so we take that very seriously, and it's something that we're fortunate that as a firm we have invested a lot into our facilities capabilities, our ability to analyze portfolios and transact, right, to reduce costs in an expedited manner, as well as drive technology solutions that can help optimize portfolios that are in place and all the aspects of that. So we've been fortunate that we've been able to really stay busy with helping clients through some very serious matters across the country.
Yeah, it's definitely been. There's no other word for it. This whole situation has just been so surreal. I think I started working remotely March 8th or so. So it's been over 2 months now since of barely leaving a Brooklyn apartment. So that's, a little small.
So I think I was around the same date you were. I was right around that 8th or 9th date there. I would not have called myself facile with Zoom or WebEx or any of the online tools, but I think we've all perfected the models, and actually they've been incredibly efficient at working through processes, and obviously when it comes to real estate, there's still a very heavy component that we've got teammates on the ground, in the line of duty, and
Sure.
that component, we are just so thankful that we've been relatively untouched by the virus, and yet our client needs have been met. So hats off to all those first responders and including facility managers that show up day in and day out to keep these assets safe in all of these environments: commercial, government, higher ed, and healthcare. And so I think that there's a lot of folks doing a lot of hard work while we're learning tools that allow us to work from remote locations.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Like when we do talk about essential workers, I don't think we have taught, like, I mean, generally just reading coverage and whatnot, we don't really think about the fact that even though a lot of buildings may be at 0% or very low occupancy, there's still got to be people there. Certain things can be automated and monitored, but there's also people that are like going there every day to just make sure these facilities are okay.
Pipes still burst.
Yeah.
Systems still break down, and other things can happen. And so you've got to these are long-term investments and assets that help business move forward, and so they need to be taken care of for sure.
And one more lighthearted question. I don't know if you might know this from your position, but are we going to have what's college football season looking like?
Well, wants and desires often differ from reality. I am not going to prognosticate on that one. I certainly hope we have sports come back soon, but I think health will rule the day.
Absolutely,
and
yes.
And I think that will play itself out in due time.
Okay. Kevin, thank you so much for walking me through all of this. It was very, very useful. I'm very happy to hear that the group's being busy and productive, and look forward to following up.
Look forward to many more conversations, and stay healthy and be well.
You too.
Guys, this was fantastic. Kevin, I'm so glad that you're on the show today, because this is a completely different viewpoint than I think, David, you've ever covered, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about like for-profit student housing in the past, but not this level of depth of what it actually means for university operations and some of the expertise that a company like JLL is bringing to the table. So this was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that the last time I spoke about it was before anybody even heard COVID-19, I think. So,
Yeah.
So this is a totally different viewpoint. Again, Kevin, thank you so much for being here. David, thank you so much for bringing him on. And audience, to you, thank you so much for listening and tuning in to the Common Area Podcast with David Bodamer. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when David comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your colleagues. Again, thanks for listening today. For everyone at NREI, this is Eric Johnson inviting you back in 2 weeks for all the stories that matter to you. And we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Common Area Podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of NREI or Informa. The content has been made available for information and educational purposes only.